Hey guys. So tonight we're doing something a little different. Instead of staring at the ceiling thinking about that one awkward text you sent 5 years ago, let's gently float into the world of monuments. You know, those big hunks of stone you've definitely seen in postcards and maybe pretended to be impressed by on vacation. They look all majestic, timeless, and noble, like they've just been sitting around waiting to inspire Instagram captions. But as always, history had other plans. Behind almost every eternal monument, there's usually a messy cocktail of personal vanity, questionable labor practices, and more than one royal meltdown. So, dim the lights, tuck in, and let's wander through some stone-built disasters together. Let's start with one of the world's most recognizable piles of rock, the Great Pyramid of Giza. Everyone loves to say it's a miracle of ancient engineering, perfectly aligned with the stars, still standing after thousands of years. What people tend to skip over is that it was basically a giant vanity project for Pharaoh Khufu, whose name, if you're curious, literally means "he protects me." Subtle. The whole pyramid wasn't built out of some deep devotion to the cosmos. No, it was basically Khufu saying, "Build me a mountain-sized tomb so everyone knows I'm important forever." And, of course, he didn't exactly build it himself. Tens of thousands of workers, probably not the poor, starving slaves Hollywood likes to imagine, but still heavily conscripted peasants, spent decades stacking limestone blocks taller than most people. Imagine telling your family you'll be back after a quick job, and then realizing the gig will last your entire adult life. And all of this, just so Khufu could be buried in a giant triangle. The irony? His tomb was looted in antiquity, so the guy ended up with basically nothing. A mountain of stone, empty on the inside, kind of a metaphor for egotistical rulers, really. Let's drift now to Paris, because who doesn't like a soft trip to France before bedtime? The Eiffel Tower. Today, it's the sparkling iron crown of the city. Tourists kiss under it, influencers pose near it, and Parisians, well, most of them have learned to live with it. But when it first went up in 1889, people hated it. They thought it looked like a rusting industrial skeleton planted in the middle of Paris. There were protests, angry letters, and one particularly poetic critic called it a monstrous black smokestack. And honestly, he kind of had a point. The man behind it, Gustave Eiffel, was pretty pleased with himself, of course. He got a giant tower named after him, even though he didn't design most of it, his engineers did. And while the Eiffel Tower looks glamorous now, it was originally supposed to be temporary. Yep, it was meant to be torn down after 20 years. But, spoiler, taking apart a 10,000-ton iron triangle isn't exactly cheap or fun. So it stayed. Paris grew into it, and now it's like the beloved pet they never wanted but couldn't get rid of. But let's float across the channel for a moment. London, Big Ben, or technically the Elizabeth Tower. This one has the vibe of a grand, Gothic symbol of British pride. Except, well, it's been broken most of its life. The Great Clock has cracked, malfunctioned, or completely stopped multiple times since it was installed. The bell itself, Big Ben, cracked during the very first test strike in 1859. They had to rotate the bell and hit it from another angle because obviously, replacing a giant piece of bronze wasn't on the table. Even now, it's more like an ongoing construction site with occasional bell ringing. Basically, it's the London version of "it looks good in pictures, but don't look too close." And speaking of looking good in pictures, the Taj Mahal. Everyone swoons over it as the symbol of eternal love, marble perfection, yada yada. The story goes, Emperor Shah Jahan built it for his beloved wife Mumtaz Mahal after she died in childbirth. Sweet, right? Except, here's the bedtime edition. Shah Jahan had multiple wives, dozens of concubines, and Mumtaz was basically his favorite baby factory. She died giving birth to her 14th child. 14th. And Shah Jahan responded by spending 20 years draining the empire's treasury to build her a shiny marble mausoleum. Which is touching, unless you were one of the laborers conscripted into carving stone for decades, or one of his subjects paying crippling taxes to fund it. And, like Khufu's pyramid, it's just another giant tomb. Love, sure. But also debt, death, and endless maintenance bills. Let's drift a little further east in our dreamlike stroll. Alright, so we've floated past pyramids, towers, and marble love letters, and now we're drifting into slightly bloodier territory. Don't worry, we'll keep it calm, no sudden jumps. Just soft, historically depressing thoughts to lull you to sleep. The Colosseum in Rome. Today, it's basically a giant stone donut with tourists circling around, selfie sticks raised high. People love to imagine the gladiator fights, lions leaping out of trapdoors, the emperor giving the thumbs down. And sure, that all happened for a while. But here's the less Instagrammable part. By the Middle Ages, the Colosseum wasn't a symbol of Rome's eternal glory. It was a free-for-all quarry. Locals literally carted away its stones to build houses, churches, and random walls around the city. Whole chunks of the eternal amphitheater are basically holding up other people's homes. Imagine the Parisians tearing apart the Eiffel Tower to make patio furniture. That's the vibe. And the construction itself? Brutal. The Colosseum was finished in the year 80 under Emperor Titus, and it wasn't exactly a cheerful ribbon cutting. The grand opening games lasted 100 days, which sounds festive until you realize it involved thousands of people and animals being killed for entertainment. Because nothing says eternal empire like forcing elephants and gladiators to duke it out for the crowd. In short, Rome's most famous landmark was kind of built on blood, and then slowly cannibalized by its own citizens. Truly, a family heirloom. But let's gently move across the Atlantic now to something more modern. The Statue of Liberty. The great copper lady with the torch, welcoming immigrants to New York Harbor. Everyone sees her as this shining beacon of hope, and she is. But the story behind her is messy. For starters, she wasn't even American. The statue was a French gift, designed by Frederick Auguste Bartholdi, who honestly just wanted to build something enormous and couldn't get anyone in France to fund him. So he pitched the US on the idea. A giant lady, holding a torch, symbolizing freedom. Who could say no? Well, America did, at least at first. Nobody wanted to pay for the pedestal. So there was this awkward period where France had built this huge copper statue, and she was basically homeless. They shipped her over in crates, and she just sat there in pieces while the Americans argued about money. It took Joseph Pulitzer, yes, the newspaper guy, to basically shame the public into donating enough coins to finish it. So, Lady Liberty exists because of a massive guilt trip fundraiser. Also, the statue was originally supposed to be a lighthouse, but she was terrible at it. The torch lighting system never worked properly, and she was abandoned as a lighthouse within a few years. So the famous beacon of freedom was more like a glorified porch light that kept burning out. Inspiring, but not exactly practical. Now, if you're not asleep yet, let's wander to the Black Hills of South Dakota. Mount Rushmore, for giant presidential heads carved into the mountain, staring forever into the distance like they've lost their car keys. On postcards, it looks patriotic, heroic, timeless. But the reality is a little different. First, the mountain itself belonged to the Lakota Sioux, who considered it sacred. The US had promised them the land in a treaty, then later decided, never mind. So carving presidents' faces into it was, to put it gently, not a gesture of respect. And then there's Gutzon Borglum, the sculptor. He originally wanted the mountain to feature not just presidents, but also things like a giant text plaque praising American history. Subtlety wasn't his strong suit. He was also known for, let's say, shaky political views, like having ties to the Ku Klux Klan earlier in his career. So the guy who gave us this patriotic landmark wasn't exactly Mr. Equality. Oh, and he didn't even finish it. He died in 1941, and the project was wrapped up early because of World War II. So even the presidents on the mountain are technically incomplete. But don't worry, they still look very majestic on souvenir mugs. Finally, let's glide over to India one more time, where we left Shah Jahan pining over his marble tomb. But there's another monument worth whispering about, the Qutb Minar in Delhi, a giant stone tower built in the 12th century. It's beautiful, it's tall, and it has inscriptions all over it praising its builder, Qutb al-Din Aibak. The catch? He fell off his horse during a polo match and died before it was finished. So his successors kept building layer after layer in different styles. That's why the tower looks a little mismatched. as if multiple architects just kept doodling on top of each other. Basically, it's the medieval version of a group project nobody agreed on. And yet, despite all the cracks, scandals, egos, and empty vaults, these monuments still stand. People line up, snap photos, write poems. They've outlived their creators, their critics, and probably us too, which is kind of comforting if you don't think too hard about the unpaid labor and shattered dreams behind them. So next time you look at one of these icons, whether it's a pyramid, a tower, or a giant stone head, you'll know behind the glory, there's usually just one insecure ruler, one overconfident architect, and a whole lot of people who would have rather been anywhere else.